Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mariah from TechServe Alliance. Welcome to today's webinar, How to Lead Productive Sales Conversations in a Recessed Market. There will be a question and answer session after the presentation, so feel free to write in any questions you want answered in the question box on the right side of your screen. We're also recording today's presentation, which will be available to TechServe members on the TechServe Alliance website. We will also be sending out follow-up emails. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Dan Fisher.
Great, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody, and or good morning to some of you, depending on where you sit across the country. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joining you guys this afternoon, and yeah, we're going to talk about how to lead a productive sales conversation in a recessed market. Things are getting pretty tough out there right now, and so we're going to dive into some specific details on how to do that, and really, my hope and my intent today as the facilitator is to give all of you or share with all of you some actionable ideas, tactics, and strategies that you can actually begin implementing today to have more productive conversations with your prospects and your customers. We can go to the next slide. So I'll run through the agenda real quick, and then I'll also give just a little bit more background on myself. So the first thing that we're going to talk about, just to provide a little bit of perspective to kind of frame today's conversation, we're going to talk about things that salespeople can control and influence, as opposed to things that we can't control. I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of call planning and why I think all salespeople should be doing it, particularly in a recessed market. Then I'm going to talk briefly about objection prevention. So I suspect many of you are hearing the objection of, we have no budget or we're not hiring. So we're going to talk about how we're going to overcome that. From there, I want to talk a little bit about why salespeople must understand how customers buy and why they buy. So we'll talk about that. And then from there, that's where the conversation is going to pivot. And we're going to talk about how to change the conversation. And I'm going to share with you guys some specific ideas on how you can position yourself as an authoritative thought leader and actually create sales opportunities, as opposed to just being a salesperson who's seeking out what I like to call just predefined budget-approved job orders. So that's kind of it in a nutshell what we're going to cover today. We can jump to the next slide. So for those of you who don't know me or aren't familiar with me or my company, I've been in the IT staffing and IT professional services industry since the mid-90s. I grew up in the business as a sales rep. I sold during the dot-com bust. I sold during I started Menemsha Group in 2008, right when the financial collapse hit that fall. So fortunately or unfortunately, I do have some experience in selling in a recession, which of course I'm going to share some ideas with you today. But as far as like what we do, just real quickly, we provide sales enablement services for IT staffing companies. So what the heck does that mean? Well, if you look at a manufacturing organization or a finance department in a company, they have standards, generally accepted accounting principles, or in a manufacturing organization, they have TQM, Total Quality Management, or Six Sigma. What that means is they have stringent standards and processes and policies for achieving excellence. When you look at sales organizations, though, and when I say sales, I'm also including recruiting in that, as a sales or a recruiting organization, we're often left to sort of fend for ourselves. So what Menemsha Group does is we work with IT staffing companies to provide them with sales enablement services. So everything from sales training, coaching, content creation, whether that be customer facing or internal sales training assets. And then of course we provide technology to deploy our services. And then of course we provide management training and help organizations with talent management. So identifying and hiring sales talent, recruiter talent, and management talent. So that's a little bit about us, but that's not why we're here today. So I want to go ahead and I want to move on, and we'll get into today's discussion. So we can jump to the next slide. So I want to kick things off with a poll question, and we've got, I think we've got 3 poll questions that I prepared for today. So I want to try to keep it a little bit interactive. So the first poll question is, I just want to hear from you guys. What are you finding most challenging right now in the current economic environment? So we'll give that just a minute here. We'll let the results come in, and then we'll share the results, and we're going to have a little conversation about that. And let's take a look. So, yeah, so not surprising. It's overcome the objection of no budget hiring freeze. And then the other one, which probably is prevalent, whether there's a pandemic going on or not, and that's connecting with prospects. And so we're gonna talk about that first one at 54%. We're gonna address that one head on, and I've got an idea to share with you on how we can overcome that. And I'll make sure that I weave in today's discussion the keys with getting callbacks or replies to your voicemail and your email messages. Unfortunately, I don't have a silver bullet answer on how you actually force your customers to pick up your phone, the phone when you actually call them. So let's jump into the next slide here. So I want to talk a little bit about things that you can control and things we can't control. So I know that sales and being a sales profession, my whole adult life, if you will, it can be really frustrating with things that you can't control, right? So it can be frustrating when we can't control our candidates. We can't control what our candidates say or what they do. We can't control the things that our customers say or the things that they do. And of course, we can't control their budget or their purchasing process. But what we can do is we can actually control who we call. We can have control over how we prepare for each call. We can control how many outbound calls or how many reach outs we make to a prospect or to our customers, whether that be LinkedIn, phone, email, social media, text. And probably most important of all, we have 100% control over the things that we say and do. And so I share that with you. You're probably thinking, well, yeah, no, duh. Well, I want this to be a reminder because when you're selling in a market like we're in right now, controlling the things that we say and do and how we prepare for a call becomes significantly amplified. And so I think it just warrants a reminder that we take the time and think about that, thinking about the things that we say and do and how we're going to prepare. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Let's jump to the next slide. So those are the things we can control. Those are the things that we can't control. But here's the thing. The whole profession of sales is really based on our ability to influence our customers. In fact, it probably doesn't say this in your job description for all the salespeople on the call right now, but what you see up on the screen actually should be in your job description. Your job description should talk about how it's your job to influence what it is that your customers think about. It's our job as salespeople to influence how our customers think. It's our job to influence what they buy, when they buy, how they buy, and why they buy. And we're going to spend most of our time talking today about how you can influence your customers' thinking. And as I just mentioned, I mean, again, the whole profession of sales is based on our ability to influence. And again, in this market, this economy that we're in right now, this is the key to having productive sales conversations. So let's jump to the next slide, and I want to dive back into that objection that we're all hearing. Whoops. Well, I guess we'll go to another poll question, and then we'll dive into it. So how many of you are physically creating? Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. So I must have gotten this a little bit out of order. Let's do this poll question, and then I'm going to jump back into that objection. I want to address that. How many of you are physically writing down a call plan before you make a sales call? So we'll give this a minute for the results to come in. Cool. So let's go ahead and take a look at the results. Interesting. Well, that's so 50-50. So that's interesting. Usually it's more like 80-20 that we see. Usually it's 20% say yes and about 80% say no. So that's actually really encouraging that many of you are taking the time to physically write down a call plan. So we're going to take a look at a call plan in just a second. Before we do that, I kind of got a little mixed up with my slides. I want to come back to the objection, though, that we brought up a couple of minutes ago. So most of you are hearing and probably getting stuck with the objection of something to the effect of, we have no budget, we're not hiring, we have a hiring freeze, or call me back in the fall. So the first thing that I want to share with you in terms of how you can address that objection is this. And this is going to sound really counterintuitive for most of you. What you can do, and what I encourage you to do, is you can actually bring up this objection. Sounds really crazy, right? Why would a salesperson actually bring up an objection? Well, here's probably what happens, or here's at least what happens when I observe salespeople making sales calls. They call the customer, and they're really in the back of their mind, they're kind of hoping and praying that the customer doesn't say, well, we don't have budget, or we put everything on freeze, or we have a hiring freeze. When that happens, most salespeople are not very well prepared to handle that within the heat of the moment of the conversation. So what happens is salespeople get thrown off their game. They're now kind of back on their toes, and they go into objection handling mode. And usually when salespeople go into objection handling mode, the call doesn't end in a very positive way or with a positive outcome. So here's what you can do to overcome it. If I call a customer and I call my customer's Jim, hey Jim, Dan Fisher calling for High Tech Staffing. How you doing today? Great, Dan. How can I help you? Well, Jim, before I explain to you why I'm calling, can I assume that you're like most of my other customers, and you're going to share with me that you've put a freeze on all spending? Yeah, Dan, that is the case. We're not spending any money with any external vendors right now. Great, Jim. I really appreciate you setting and managing my expectations regarding your budget. Let's take that and put that in the parking lot for a couple of minutes, and let me explain to you why I'm calling. So what I do in that situation, by bringing it up on my own terms, it allows me to exert much more control over the message and how I handle the objection. I'm able to bring the objection up on my terms, which is going to give me more confidence in being able to address it and to be able to navigate around that issue or that concern. I'm also setting expectations with the customer with regards to, let me explain with you why I'm calling, and then we can talk about the budget later. So that would be my recommended approach for how you go about addressing this, because we know we have to assume at this point that everyone that you call on is going to be bringing up this objection. So every call that you make, you should just automatically assume that you're going to hear that. So rather than hoping and praying that they don't bring it up, my experience is if you bring it up on your own terms, it puts you in the best position possible to handle it in the most effective way possible. So I wanted to make sure I addressed that. Okay, so I want to talk for a couple of minutes about creating a sales call plan. So Mariah, if we could bring up that handout, I'm going to go through that real quickly. So one of the things that we teach in our sales training courses, and one of the things that we strongly recommend of sales managers, that we work with, is they should actually be tracking in measuring whether or not their salespeople are creating call plans. And so you might be thinking, well, oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting metric to track. I mean, we track calls and meetings and job orders and so forth, but never thought about tracking call plans. Well, here's why you want to start tracking and measuring how many call plans your salespeople complete. The key at the most basic level, the key to having a productive sales conversation starts with call planning. So let's face it, many salespeople, myself included, we often like to just show up to a sales call, whether that's a face-to-face meeting, a video meeting, or a call. We often just like to show up and just sort of play things by ear and let things, kind of let things play out. We'll see where things go. I can promise you this, particularly for those who have never sold in a down economy or a recession. If you do that, you're going to miss out on potential opportunities, and your calls are going to end in you're not going to get the desired outcome that you're seeking. So the best way to have productive conversations simply starts with creating a call plan. So what's a good call plan look like? Well, the first thing is you need to have a call objective. So what exactly is it that you want to achieve? Is there a specific piece of information that you want to glean from the customer? Is there a specific action item that you want the customer to take? Maybe you want your customer, your prospect, to think differently about you and your company and what it is that you offer. So step one is, what's our call objective? Let's scroll down a little bit further. So the next thing is, what am I going to say to introduce myself? So I realize that might sound really like rudimentary. You'd be surprised. I've coached thousands of salespeople. I've listened in. I've been plugged in on headsets and listened to tens of thousands of sales calls. A lot of salespeople don't know how to introduce themselves. So take the time to just think through what it is you're going to say to introduce yourself and the purpose of your call. Let's keep scrolling down to the next section. So the next section says, what am I going to say that demonstrates credibility? And now this call plan that we're looking at is under the assumption that it's a cold prospect. So I don't know them, they don't know me, they're not familiar with me or my company. So you got to understand that when you call a prospect for the first time, especially in a market like we're in right now, what's going through their mind is this guy wasting my time? Does this salesperson know anything about me and my company? Do they know anything about the work that I'm involved in? So the best way and the quickest way that you're going to build credibility with your prospects is you got to share with them what it is that you know about them. So you've got to really think through what it is you're going to say to demonstrate credibility. If you can't quickly demonstrate credibility on a phone call, then you have no chance for the customer to be compelled to continue the conversation with you. So really, really important. If we go down one step further, down to where it says demonstrate credibility a little bit further, you'll notice the bullet points say a goal they're trying to achieve, a problem they're trying to solve, or a project that they're working on. 46% of you in that initial poll said that one of the challenges you're facing is getting a response, and connecting with a prospect. Well, again, we can't control whether or not our people pick up the phone. But if you want to get more return phone calls and more responses to your emails, and in fact, I just had this conversation on a group coach call with a customer earlier this morning, you need to uncover what their top priority is. So the customers that you're calling on, particularly right now, COVID-19 has turned everybody's business upside down. So what their priorities were a couple of months ago is not the same today. Heck, what their priorities were just a couple of weeks ago has probably changed. So you need to take the time to do the research to figure out what the manager that you're calling on, what his or her top priority is. And then you need to build a message around that priority and how you can help them accomplish or achieve that priority, whether it's solving a problem, achieving a goal, or solving a problem on time. Delivering a project on time. I'll talk more about that a little bit later in the presentation. So critically important. The next component that goes into your call plan is what's your value proposition. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about a value proposition a little bit later, but your value proposition basically answers this question that's going through the mind of your prospect. So your prospect is thinking, how can you make an impact on my business? How are you going to quantifiably impact my team or my project? Real simple. And if we don't have an answer to that question, especially in this day and age, in the economy that we're selling in right now, we've probably got we've got like slim to no chance. I mean, it's so our messaging really important, really important that we have a really good, compelling value proposition. And again, your value proposition answers the question of how are you going to make a quantifiable impact on my business? Let's scroll down a little bit further. The next thing that we need to plan out, and again, remember folks, we have 100% control over creating call plans and how we prepare for our sales calls. So the next thing is we need to think about what are the questions that we want to ask or the issues that we need to validate. So think about how many times you take a job rec. You take a job rec, you get off the phone with the customer, you go through the job rec, and then you say to yourself, oh my gosh, I forgot to ask these 3 questions. Happens all the time. Critically important that when you're making a prospecting call, whether it's to a new prospect or a current customer, that you take the time to write down the questions. Otherwise, you're going to forget and you're going to miss opportunities. And you guys just told me how difficult it is to connect with buyers based on the poll. The last thing you want to have happen is you finally get a prospect or a customer on the phone, you fail to write down the questions you need to ask, and then you forget to ask those questions. It might be 6 weeks before you get them back on the phone. So it's best to have everything laid out in advance to ensure success. Now you'll notice the next component of a good call plan says the relevant ideas, insights, and trends that I will share. So we as salespeople, we have to come prepared to share relevant ideas and insights that are going to be of value to the buyer persona of the customer that we're calling on. So one of the things that I'm hearing a lot of salespeople say these days is they're making sales calls and they're saying to the customer, hey, Mr. Customer, hey, I'd like to set up a meeting or I'd like to set up a call with you to learn more about your business. Well, that may be true. And yes, we always have questions that we want to ask to learn about our customer's business. But the problem is when you say that out loud to the customer, on the other end of the line, the customer's thinking, well, what's the value in the conversation for me? What am I going to get out of that conversation? And the answer, of course, is nothing. So it's very self-serving. So we have, as sales professionals, we have to come prepared to share relevant ideas and insights. The other thing I'll just mention, I hear from a lot of salespeople at the TechServe conference and other industry events and just those that I work with in the industry. I hear folks say, well, gosh, I don't want to be treated like a commodity supplier. I want to be treated like a partner. Well, if you want to be treated like a partner and an equal peer, then we have to stop acting like a commodity supplier. And instead, we have to start doing these things. We have to start sharing relevant ideas and insights. And I'm going to share more with you in a few minutes or in a little bit how we do that. Let's go down just a little bit further. So as she's scrolling down, the last piece is we've got to prepare for what some of the pushbacks, what are the potential objections, what are the potential frequently asked questions that we're going to hear, and then what are our rebuttals going to be. Now, the good news is, if you've been in this industry for any amount of time, if you've been in it for 18 months or longer, heck, it probably doesn't even take 18 months, maybe 12 months. At the end of the day, there's really only a handful of different types of calls that you make in this business. You're making cold calls, you're making lead nurturing calls, and you're making calls to either take a job order or to get candidate feedback. And so my point is, based on what type of call you're making, it should be really easy for you to prepare for and anticipate potential objections. So if you've been prospecting and you're in this business for 6 months or longer and you're getting stuck with the objection of we have a vendors list or talk to HR, it's kind of inexcusable to not have a rebuttal to overcome that once you've been doing this for 6 months. You should know that that objection's coming and you should have a rebuttal for it. So pretty easy to prepare for it. Again, we as salespeople just need to make sure that we actually take the time to write down what it is that we're going to say and do to overcome it. So those are just the basic outline or a template of what a call plan looks like. Again, depending on the type of call that you're making, there could be other components that you might want to include in your call plan, but those are the basics. All right, let's jump into the next slide, Mariah. So I'm just waiting for the slide to appear on my screen. By the way, if you're wondering why I have a bad haircut, that's called doing it yourself in the middle of a pandemic. Yes, I need to get to my barber. All right, all kidding aside. So we talked about objection prevention. We talked about how to handle this. So let's go on to the next slide. Great, thank you. So I want to talk about the importance of why salespeople need to understand why customers buy. So this is really, really important. And now that we're in a down economy, it's even more important that salespeople understand this. This is like sales 101. So let's think about consumers for a second. So everybody on this call, myself included, we're all consumers. So it's a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon. Maybe we go out shopping. Maybe we're looking for a new set of golf clubs to buy some new clothing, whatever it may be. Consumers buy out of want and out of desire. We buy out of emotion. Now, there are times, of course, where we buy out of necessity, but we also buy out of want and desire. It makes us feel good. We get emotional enlightenment out of that. Now, in the corporate world, though, so we're all in B2B sales, business to business sales, and in corporate America only buys external products and services out of absolute necessity. So even if they know that they absolutely need to get a solution to a problem or a solution to achieve a goal, they're going to put off that purchase as long as they absolutely positively can. So they only buy, again, out of product, out of desire. So right now, even though your customers have put a freeze on all hiring or all spending, they still have goals that they're trying to achieve. They still have products and services that they need to deliver to their customers. They still have service level agreements that they must meet. And so what every customer is thinking about is they're thinking about how they can increase revenue, how they can reduce cost, and how they can better improve asset utilization or allocate their assets and ultimately improve efficiency. So even the hiring managers that you're calling on and corporate buyers, what they're interested in is they're interested in hearing about how you can help them increase revenue, reduce cost, or improve efficiency. And this ties back into my point I made earlier about a value proposition. This is what your customer wants to talk about. Talking about these three things is what's going to pique their interest. And they're interested in these three things because this is what every company in the world is trying to achieve. Not only that, the hiring managers that you're calling on, to a large degree, this is how they're measured. This is how they're evaluated. This is how they earn their bonus. They earn their bonus based on how well their team and their projects contribute to the success of their company in any one of these three areas. So it's critically important that even though they're putting a freeze on spend or a freeze on hiring, they're still trying to achieve these three things, and they still have challenges that lie in their way for achieving any one of these three things. So let's go to the next slide. And we've got a poll question. So how many of you, when you make a prospecting call or a follow-up call to a prospect or a customer, say something to the effect of, hey, Mr. Customer, hey, I'm reaching out to check in to see what upcoming staffing needs you have. Or, hey, I saw the job posting out on your career page. How many of you are saying something to that effect? So we'll give this about 30 seconds and then we'll take a look at the results. All right, let's take a look at the results here. So interesting. So this is great. This is actually surprising for me. Usually we find about 80% of salespeople are leading with that. I mean, heck, it's only natural. We're in the staffing business, so we're calling to reach out to find out what are some of their staffing needs. So what we want to do, and we can jump to the next slide, what we need to do is we need to change the conversation. So if you want to avoid the objection of we have a hiring freeze or we're putting a freeze on all spending, we as salespeople need to learn to change the conversation. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is we need to stop talking about job orders or asking about what their staffing needs are. And instead, we need to start speaking the language of the buyer. We have to start talking about how we can help our customers achieve their desired business results. So to change the conversation, we need to ask questions to uncover our customers' current state and their desired future state. So what does that mean exactly? Well, let me try to explain that. Uncovering your customer's current state, basically that refers to uncovering how happy or how content they are with the way that things are going with their team or their department or their project. And so the point is, we need to uncover a level of dissatisfaction or quote unquote a pain point that they have, again, with either their team, a project that they're working on, or a product that they're trying to deliver, or it could even be a vendor that they're working with. So perhaps many of you have heard the old, the saying that a lot of IT people like to use. A lot of IT people like to talk in terms of the as-is state and the desired future state. So current state and desired future state, same thing, as-is and to be. So that's what the current state is. How happy and content are they with the current situation and the way things are going? Their desired future state really refers to us as salespeople understanding the goals and objectives that they're trying to achieve, the problems that they're trying to solve, and the changes that they want to see for the better of their team, the better of their customers, their department, and overall the organization. So now you might be thinking, well, gee, why is this so important? Why is uncovering the customer's current state and desired future state so important? Well, it's important for us to understand this and recognize this because this is what your customers spend most of their time thinking about. The hiring managers, the IT, and just so I'm clear, I'm not talking about HR people. I'm talking about directors, VPs, CIOs in an IT department. What they're thinking about is they're thinking about how things are operating today and then what their desired future state is. Now, of course, you guys see up on the slide the big red triangle with the money sign or the dollar figure, and it says gap or discrepancy. So that gap or discrepancy, that's where your sales opportunity lies. So most customers have some sort of a gap or discrepancy that's preventing them from going from their current state to the desired future state. So it's this gap or discrepancy that represents the roadblock, the challenge, the pain point, if you will. And this is where our sales opportunity lies, which is why you see, again, the dollar figure there. So we want to change the conversation to talk about this. And the other benefit to doing this is if we start to engage our customer to talk about their current state and their desired future state, and then uncovering the gap or discrepancy, it's going to allow us to more intelligently position our service offering as a solution to their problem or achieving their goal, rather than just pitching a candidate or pitching a skill set. So it's a much different conversation. Let's go to the next slide. So the question now becomes, well, what are some of the probing questions we should be asking our customer to identify their current state and their desired future state? So these are just some examples. There's plenty of others that you could be asking, but notice that these questions, they're all open-ended, and they're open-ended and designed to give you as a sales professional insight about your customers and what they're thinking and how they're feeling. Particularly if we look at the questions around the desired future state, they help us gain insight as to what the customer wants to achieve, and why it's important for them to achieve those things. It gives us insight to understand what their plans are for moving forward, what, if any, initiatives might be underway. And so, again, it also allows us or enables us to more effectively position our offering as a solution to helping them go from their current state to their desired future state. So this is much more about intelligently positioning our offering. And not only that, it's going to put us in position to co-create a vision for the solution. Now, in the beginning, I think it was on the agenda slide, I had mentioned the term predefined budget approved job orders. So I don't want you guys to think like I don't mean to sound like a jerk or to be insensitive or what have you, but a lot of salespeople in this business, and I used to be one of them until I went through training and I learned, but a lot of salespeople are simply making calls or sending out emails to check in to see if a customer has a predefined budget approved job order. That's not selling. That's just being an order taker. That's just finding a customer and getting lucky that they have a job rec. What we're talking about here is engaging a customer, getting a customer to admit that they have a problem that's preventing them from achieving a goal, and then influencing their thinking and influencing them to take action, to make a commitment to solve that problem, and ultimately hire a consultant or hire your team to solve that problem or implement a solution. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like and what that sounds like. But I hope that I'm making myself clear. So this is a very different conversation, and frankly, in my opinion, this gets into, I think, advanced selling. It's a much more sophisticated conversation. Let's go to the next slide. So I want to talk about thought leadership. So what does it mean to provide thought leadership, and what does it mean to be an authoritative thought leader? Well, what it means is, as sales professionals, we need to share fresh ideas and insights so that we can help our customers achieve their goals. Now, keep in mind that the insights that you share need to be highly relevant to the buyer persona that you're calling on. So if I sell to QA managers, but I also sell to DevOps managers, the ideas and insights that I share with those two different buyer personas are going to be vastly different. And if I sell to HR, the insights I'm going to share with them is going to be vastly different as well. So we have to have relevant ideas and insights to share with these different buyer personas. Now, here's the good news. Being a thought leader doesn't mean that you need to be a technical expert, doesn't mean that you need to understand technology. It also doesn't mean that you need to go to Harvard to get your MBA. You just need to be able to understand your buyers and understand what's important to them and the challenges that they face. And you need to understand how they're measured and evaluated. Because when you understand those things, you can then go out to the marketplace and you can aggregate and curate third-party content and share that with them. Now, if you can start to develop your own business acumen and learn from working with your other customers and start to point things out to your customers, new ideas, different approaches to solving problems, then of course that's even better. And a lot of top performers in today's, a lot of top performers are in fact able to do that. So this is really, really important because being a thought leader, this is all about how your customer perceives you. Today's buyer expects to do business with experts. They don't want to do business with a generalist. And so when you're perceived as a thought leader, that's how you can start to influence how your customers think, the things that they think about, and you can start to influence what they buy, when they buy, and how they buy. So I want to jump to the next slide, and I want to introduce to you guys the concept of insight selling. And I've actually got, I'm sorry, one other slide here, then we're going to jump to that. So speaking like a thought leader. So what are some things that you can say and do? So when you're reaching out to your customers, you could be saying, and you should be saying, Mr. Customer, I'm working with a number of other DevOps executives like yourself in the finance industry. One of the challenges we're seeing is, and you share with them, what are the challenges that other DevOps executives are struggling with? And then, of course, you would also share with them how they're going about solving those problems. Or you could say, Mr. Customer, in working with other PMO leaders, one of the trends that we're seeing for best practices is, or what we found in our experience from working with other customers, or our clients are sharing with us. So when you preface statements like this, you start to position yourself as an authoritative thought leader. And again, you don't have to be an expert on this. You just have to be willing to take the time to do the research to understand what's important to your buyers, aggregate the information, and then share the fresh insights. Go to Gartner, go to Forrester, go to Serious Decisions, pick up this information and share it with them. That's how they're going to perceive you as a thought leader, and that's going to make an impact on the quality of the conversations that you have, and they're going to feel much more confident and comfortable in opening up to you and sharing with you the goals that they're trying to achieve, and and again, going back to current state and future state. So really, really important. All right, let's jump to the next slide. So we got a short little video we're going to play here on the concept of insight selling. So we can go ahead and roll this. Excellent, I was muted. So we can jump back into the slides. So basically what that video is explaining, I think we might have missed the very beginning, is it was talking about the role of a mentor. So, right, if you have a good mentor, what mentors are really good at is they're really good at helping you think things through. So if you have a big decision that you have to make, a mentor is great to talk to because they're a sounding board for you. They help you weigh the pros and cons of making the decision one way or another. They share with you their experiences. They don't necessarily give you the answer, but they influence your thinking. That's what insight selling is. That's what we need to be doing, what salespeople need to be doing to not only position themselves as a value-add partner and an authoritative thought leader, but to get customers to actually buy in a down economy. Again, this is not about trying to shove, it's not about having a self-serving sales pitch where we're trying to shove our service or our candidate down their throat, but it's asking inquisitive questions. It's having a natural sense of curiosity. And in general, insight selling can come in a couple of different forms. One is I refer to as opportunity insight. So opportunity insight simply, focuses on sharing a particular idea that could create an opportunity for you. So maybe you learn something about your customer's business, maybe you identify a bottleneck in their business, or you have an idea for how they could do something more effectively. So you simply share that idea with them. So that's one way, that's opportunity insight. Now, the other one is collaborative insight, and that just comes in the form of you basically brainstorming with a customer and sharing with them ideas and being a sounding board for them on how they could go about, completing a project on time, how they might want to go about staffing an upcoming project. And through that brainstorming exercise, the salesperson creates what I like to call aha moments. That is how we as salespeople influence our customers and how they think, how they buy, what they buy, and when they buy. So that's what we're referring to with insight selling. Let's jump to the next slide, and I know we're running short on time here, and I want to make sure we have time for questions. So I believe the next slide is going to take us to a value proposition, or explaining what a value proposition is. So earlier I mentioned that in our call plan, we've got to have a value proposition. So again, your value proposition answers the question for the customer: how are you going to make a quantifiable impact on my business? So most staffing companies think of a value proposition as something to the effect of saying something like, well, we're local, we're relationship focused, we've been in business for X number of years, we've got a great candidate database. And so those aren't value propositions. Those are that's just salespeople making like sort of self-serving statements. So your value proposition should include a couple of key components. So if my buyer persona that I'm calling on and selling to is the director of DevOps, that director of DevOps needs to hear from me how I've helped other directors of DevOps solve a specific problem unique to running a DevOps team. So I have to explain to them, articulate to them a problem that I've solved for others. I need to articulate the solution that we implemented. And by the way, the solution is not what our recruiters do to go out and find candidates. The solution is, what did our consultants do? What's the solution our consultants implemented to overcome that problem or that pain point? And then what are the quantifiable results? So how did the work of our consultants make a quantifiable impact on the customer's business? In other words, quantifiably, how did they help them reduce cost, increase revenue, or better utilize assets? Did they help them grow market share? Did they take a product to market quicker? This is absolutely critical to have a value proposition like this. And I'll just share, this is the last slide, and then we'll go into Q&A. I'm actually working with an IT staffing firm right now. They're about 100 million in revenue. And we've been going through this exercise of helping them build out their customer value props. And by the way that we do it is we actually go out and interview customers, and we interview consultants to capture this information. It's completely changing the whole way in which their sales organization sells. So if you don't have value props, if you don't have these customer success stories, there's no better time than the present to take the time to start building these out. Critically important, because today's buyer in this market, they need to hear how you're making a quantifiable impact on their business. They're going to need to know what sort of ROI they can expect from working with you, or going staff aug, or hiring your candidate or team of candidates. So there's no better time than the present to start thinking through not only building out these stories, but building out ROI calculators to be able to demonstrate the quantifiable value and impact of working with you and your organization. So I know we're running short on time, so I'm gonna I'm going to hand it back over to you, Mariah, and we'll tee up any questions, or I guess I can look at the questions and see if we have any questions from the group. So I've got the question queue open right now. I don't see any questions. We'll give it a few minutes, give you guys a chance to fire away. So here's one question, and it says, Dan, how do you figure out what the challenges are of the buyers that you call on? So I think what this person's getting at is, hey, I've never worked in an IT department. If I call on a DevOps manager, or a QA manager, I don't run a QA department. I don't know what it's like day to day. Great question. So you've got to go out and you've got to interview your ideal buyers. So you've got to go out and talk to buyers. You got to talk to your QA managers, talk to your DevOps managers, and ask them, hey, explain it to me in layman's terms. What's it like to live a day in the life of you as a QA manager? What are the typical challenges that you face? How are you measured and evaluated? Where do you go to get information? And then you take that insight, and that insight's going to allow you to personalize and tailor your messaging every time you call on that buyer persona type, whether it be a QA manager or a DevOps manager. I think I got another question here. So, okay, I got another question here. Bear with me. Let me read through it. So the question is, a lot of our clients are pausing the interview and hiring process, onboarding process, because they have to do it remotely. And they're hitting the pause button because they've never done it remotely. So how do we overcome that objection? Well, I don't actually have, there's not like a one size fits all answer to that question, but I can tell you, I actually have a couple of customers that specifically told me they've encountered this. And what they told me they told me they didn't know how to overcome it either. So what they did is they went and they figured it out. They figured out a solution on how to onboard people remotely. Now, I don't know exactly what steps they took to figure out how to do remote onboarding, but the point is they didn't have a solution. So they went and they figured it out. They went and they did research. They talked to other people and they came up with a solution. So there's not a playbook right now there's not like a COVID-19 playbook for IT staffing companies. So we've got to get creative. We got to think outside of the box. So I'm sorry I don't have a more specific answer or out of the box sort of canned response for that objection, but that's, I think that's the lesson learned and the takeaway. All right, I think I have some more questions coming in, so bear with me. So sorry, the way that the window appears with the questions is really small, so it's like really hard for me to read the questions. So the question is, where is the transition between covering this on a call plan versus asking for a meeting to discuss insights? Most of the time, we only have a few seconds to capture the attention on a call. Great question, love the question. So it sounds something like this. Now, keep in mind the context could be a little bit different, whether it's an existing customer versus a cold prospect, but it would sound something like this. Hey, Jim, Dan Fisher reaching out from Menemsha Group. How you doing? Great, Dan, how can I help you? And it could sound something like this. Hey, Jim, I'm reaching out to you because I've been spending a lot of my time over these last couple of weeks working with other DevOps leaders like yourself and finding out how they're handling the challenges of COVID-19. One of the trends that I'm learning and what I'm hearing is X. And I share with them what that trend is or what that challenge is. And then my question that I follow it up with is, Jim, how are you going about approaching this in your organization? What are you seeing within your organization? So what I do is I position myself as an authoritative thought leader by sharing with the customer what I'm seeing from other customers, because that's what's going to make him or her, the customer, feel comfortable and engaging in a dialogue with me. And then I immediately followed up with an open-ended probing question. What are you seeing in this space, or how are you going about addressing that challenge? And that's our entry point into uncovering kind of their current state and what they're thinking. And from there, the conversation, of course, can go in a lot of different directions. But hopefully hopefully I answered your question. By the way, I'll just mention one other thing. Obviously, we can't schedule face-to-face meetings right now, but we can schedule video calls, video meetings. But my suggestion, I would really be advocating, or I would suggest that you before you try to schedule a meeting, the first step is I think you want to try to get them to share with you what their current state and their desired future state is. And then that's going to justify and warrant the need to have a video call, to have a more in-depth discussion, and to hopefully convert that into an actual sales opportunity. All right. Let me see if there are any other questions here. So, okay, I got another one here. Our salespeople are mainly doing emails at this time, can't reach a majority of clients via phone. We aren't having many conversations at this time. It's difficult to get to current and future state without conversations. Yeah, great point. So, so there's a lot of different things that you can, of course, do from a prospecting standpoint. But this all comes back to positioning yourself as an authoritative thought leader. So you got to find out what's on the minds of your customers. And again, I kind of already touched on this. Each customer, each buyer type that you call on, again, QA, DevOps, app dev, infrastructure, they all have their own unique set of challenges right now. Step one to getting a call back and to getting them on the phone is you got to find out what their top priority is. Then you got to do some research and figure out what might be some good solutions. Again, we've got to come to the party with something. We've got to have something of value. And that's going to require a little upfront research. If you just keep calling and saying, hey, I'm reaching out trying to check in, they're not going to call you back. So we've got to offer something of value. And the way to figure out what they're going to value is to find out what's their top priority. It's the only way that you're going to get traction. That and of course a value prop, having customer success stories. Cool, so I know we've gone a few minutes over. Mariah, I'm all set on my end. I don't know if you have anything that you want to close with. Oh, I guess the only thing I would close with, we are doing a special for TechServe folks, the folks that have attended today's webinar, so you can see it up on the screen. We are offering a discount on our training. If anybody has any interest, simply reach out to me. And be happy to handle, field any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. And thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. I just want to remind everyone that it was recorded and will be distributed on our website as well as in the follow-up email. Thank you so much, everyone. Stay safe and have a good day.
Thank you.